My story begins back when I was a teenager, living in a small, tightly knit community where everyone knew each other. Our families were next-door neighbors, and our connection ran deep. Both families had shared a close bond for generations. From as far back as I could remember, there was a sense of inevitability about our relationship. Everyone around us, our parents, relatives, and even neighbors, believed we would end up together. We believed it too. Growing up side by side, sharing countless moments and memories, it felt like we were meant for each other. During high school, our friendship naturally blossomed into something more. We started dating, and those years felt perfect, filled with the simple joys and excitement of young love. Everything seemed to fall into place effortlessly, and the future appeared bright. We had our plans, dreams, and expectations, and we fully believed that nothing could come between us. However, life had other plans. After graduating, I received an opportunity to pursue my master's degree in a different state. It was a chance I couldn't pass up, but it also meant leaving behind everything familiar, including her. We tried to keep our relationship going despite the distance, determined to make it work. For a year, we navigated the complexities of a long-distance relationship, but the strain took its toll. The late-night calls, the missed milestones, and the growing loneliness became too much. Eventually, we made the difficult decision to end the romantic part of our relationship and remain friends instead. It wasn't what either of us wanted, but we knew it was the right choice. The pressure of maintaining a relationship across state lines was overwhelming, and we were both struggling under the weight of it. In the years that followed, we tried to move on. We dated other people and built separate lives. But deep down, there was always this unspoken understanding that our story wasn't over. We both knew, in some quiet corner of our hearts, that we would find our way back to each other someday. After completing my degree, I decided to stay in the city where I had studied and began my career. During this time, I met Rick, my mentor, who quickly became more than just a professional guide. He turned into a close friend and confidant. One day, Rick called me into his office with an unexpected and exciting opportunity. He presented me with the chance to take a 3-year contract in Singapore. The pay wasn't extraordinary, but the position included covered expenses like housing and travel, making it a financially viable option. Rick emphasized how valuable this international experience would be for my career, sharing stories about how a similar opportunity had shaped his own professional journey. I trusted his judgment and decided to take the leap. The first year in Singapore was a whirlwind of challenges and growth. Adjusting to a new culture and navigating unfamiliar business practices was tough, but I slowly adapted. The experience pushed me out of my comfort zone in ways I hadn't anticipated. During my time there, I dated casually, always being upfront with anyone I met about my temporary stay and lack of long-term intentions. Occasionally, Rick would visit for work-related supervision, and those visits became a highlight. We would explore the vibrant city together, sharing meals and stories, and those moments helped me stay grounded. After my contract ended, I returned home, feeling like a different person. Within a month of settling back in, I unexpectedly ran into her at my parents' house. It felt like fate had intervened. She had broken up with her boyfriend a year earlier, and our reconnection felt natural, almost inevitable. We started talking again, and it was as if no time had passed. Our conversations flowed effortlessly, and soon, we found ourselves dating once more. Yet, something felt different this time. I was hesitant about becoming intimate. My experiences in Asia had changed me in ways I couldn't fully articulate, and I worried about how those changes might affect our relationship. When we finally crossed that bridge, she noticed the difference in my experience level. Her questions about my time away made me uncomfortable, and I struggled to be completely honest about my past relationships. I downplayed certain aspects, thinking it would be easier that way. I didn't realize then that this lack of transparency would later come back to haunt us. Our families were overjoyed to see us back together. They had always believed in our connection, and it felt like a perfect storybook ending. Two childhood sweethearts finding their way back to each other. We moved in together, and soon we began planning our wedding for the summer of 2020. Everything seemed idyllic, and we were filled with hope and excitement for the future. But around New Year's, everything changed. One evening, she was going through wedding details with her cousin Arya when she asked to have a serious talk. Arya stayed in the living room while we sat down at the kitchen table. Her expression was serious, and she asked me not to interrupt her. Then, she dropped a bombshell. She wanted to explore an open relationship before marriage. Her reasoning took me by surprise. She explained that she felt insecure about our differing levels of experience and was worried that I might become dissatisfied and cheat in the future. She laid out specific rules for this arrangement. Only strangers, no repeat encounters, and no emotional involvement. At first, I thought she was joking. When I realized she wasn't, a wave of anger and disbelief washed over me. In the heat of the moment, I directed my frustration at Arya, accusing her of planting the idea. Arya denied it, insisting she was only there for support. My fiancée then added that I could also see other people under the same rules, which only deepened my shock. Desperate to provoke a reaction, I sarcastically pointed at Arya and said she could be my first choice. That backfired instantly. My fiancée reminded me that it was inappropriate since Arya was family. That night, I couldn't bring myself to sleep in the same bed as her. I spent the night in the guest room, my mind racing. The next day, she started night shifts at work, and that created some physical distance between us. She tried to bridge the gap by leaving sweet notes with dinner, but I couldn't bring myself to respond with anything more than short, cold replies. A week later, while using her laptop, I discovered a hotel reservation in her email. The hotel was suspiciously close to my office, and she had supposedly been working that night. My mind spiraled. The next day at work, I couldn't concentrate, desperate for answers. I even searched dating sites for anonymous profiles, but found nothing. Rick noticed my distress and invited me to lunch. When he casually suggested having lunch at the same hotel's restaurant, I refused immediately. My anxiety spiked, and I shared everything with Rick. He offered me unlimited leave, paid or unpaid, and I accepted. That evening, Rick and I waited in the hotel lobby. Around 6:30 p.m., I saw her at the front desk, not in her nurse's uniform. After she checked in, I called her room from the lobby phone. When she answered, all my pent-up frustration and hurt came out. I yelled that our relationship was over and left without waiting for an explanation. In the days that followed, I stayed at Rick's place, avoiding all calls. My dad was the only person I contacted, briefly explaining what had happened. Everyone tried to reach me, but I didn't respond. Rick advised me to handle the financial matters concerning our house, wedding loans, and joint expenses, but I couldn't bring myself to deal with it. Eventually, I sent her an email saying everything was off and I was leaving town. After another call with my dad, who was disappointed but understanding, I booked a flight to Bali. I spent the next month in isolation, drowning in anger and shame, trying to make sense of how everything had unraveled so quickly. I arrived in Singapore on March 1st, 2020, at a time when rumors of a new virus and potential lockdowns were spreading. My plan was simple. Stay for 30 to 60 days, just enough time for things to calm down before returning home. But life had other plans. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and soon over a year had passed. By the time I received my vaccination, I had settled into my new reality, renting out my house back home and consciously avoiding any news about her, someone I had left behind and wanted to forget. Everything changed in September 2021. During a routine call with my family, I received news that shook me to the core. My father had suffered a heart attack and needed triple bypass surgery. I had spent so long avoiding my past, dreading the idea of returning. But this was something I couldn't ignore. I had to see him. I also wanted to thank Rick, a friend who had been my rock during difficult times. When I landed back home, I went straight to the hospital. My dad looked surprisingly well and was in good spirits about the upcoming surgery. We talked for hours, covering light topics and shared memories, carefully sidestepping anything too heavy. I didn't want to add to his stress. While I was there, Rick messaged me, saying the CEO of our company wanted to see me. The timing felt off, but I decided to face it rather than let it hang over me. At the office, the CEO's demeanor was serious. He launched into a lecture about responsibility and dedication, then turned to Rick and asked why they should keep me on the team. Rick, with his usual wit, joked that I worked for 20% below market rate, and they shared a laugh. The tension broke. The CEO then shifted gears, offering unexpected life advice about relationships and personal growth. It turned out I wasn't being fired. Instead, I was getting promoted. Rick had been advocating for me all along, watching my back when I hadn't even realized it. Rick and I decided to grab drinks afterward, even though it was still morning. Over a couple of beers, he convinced me that I needed to confront her for closure. I was hesitant. I had spent so long trying to bury that part of my life, but deep down, I knew he was right. I unblocked her on social media and sent a message asking if she would meet me for dinner. She agreed, and we set a date. I was filled with dread and anticipation as the evening approached. Two fears haunted me: that my anger would take over or that my old feelings would resurface. I hoped to find a middle ground, some semblance of balance. But when she walked into the restaurant, all my plans crumbled. She looked beautiful, wearing the same perfume that used to be my favorite. We shared an awkward hug before sitting down. I noticed she wasn't wearing any rings, not even the engagement ring I had given her. We started with safe topics. I told her about my dad's health, and she shared that she had checked on him during her hospital shifts, reassuring me that his surgeon was one of the best. We talked about her experiences working through the COVID-19 pandemic and my time in Singapore. On the surface, I remained calm, but inside, I was unraveling. Eventually, she steered the conversation to the topic we had both been avoiding. "I want to tell you how sorry I am for hurting you," she said softly. Her words cut deep. "Are you sorry you got caught or sorry for what you did?" I shot back, unable to hide the bitterness. "I'm sorry for ruining our future. My insecurities destroyed everything," she admitted, her voice trembling. As the conversation unfolded, she revealed something I had never known. Her ex before me had cheated on her because he felt overshadowed by her feelings for me. "I never planned for you to find out about the hotel. I thought I could keep my emotions separate. Even if you discovered it, I believed we could work through it like we always did," she explained. "You thought wrong," I said. "The most painful part wasn't the act itself, but the betrayal of trust. I didn't need you to be perfect, just faithful." She excused herself to the bathroom, needing a moment to compose herself. Meanwhile, Rick, who had come along for moral support, was in the lounge area chatting with two women. He noticed me looking over and gave me a thumbs up before returning to his conversation. That was just who he was, always lighthearted, even in serious moments. When she returned, she insisted on clarifying what happened that night. "Nothing happened," she said. "When you called the room, I panicked and ran to the lobby, but you were already gone. Can you forgive me?" she asked. "I already have," I replied. "You're not a horrible person. You just made terrible choices. It's not all your fault. I should have understood your worries better." I reminded her of a childhood memory when I had protected her from a stray dog. "Even now, I tried to protect you, but this time, while I was shielding you, you stabbed me in the back." Tears streamed down her face as she pushed the ring box across the table. I didn't take it. "I wish I was home playing with the baby we could have had by now," I blurted out, instantly regretting my words. We both needed a moment to calm down. When we did, we talked about the future. Our families were close, and we knew we'd have to find a way to coexist. Getting back together wasn't an option, but we could be civil. We ended the night with a long, bittersweet hug. It was the closure I hadn't realized I needed. I learned that love isn't always enough when trust is broken, Forgiving someone doesn't mean you have to let them back into your life. It means you're ready to move forward with yours.